start recording, but we will eventually have this in lecture mode, so we won't be listening to everybody in the background and dogs barking and all that fun stuff. Exactly. But during this, you'll be able to use the chat feature there to ask questions. And then later on, if you want to talk in person, we can unmute the phones and you can just say what you have to say. So what I'm going to do is put us in lecture mode and then get rolling. I'll probably do a few exercises to make sure that you're awake and ready to go. But anyway, let me put us all in lecture mode.
Brian, you can close it. Can you use Terence testimony last week? Well, doing it, you can.
Sorry. You're all on the same page. I went and got an extension cord and I had to do some plate TV from the wall and plug it into.
Okay, I can hear you, so I must have pushed the wrong button. I'm mechanically challenged. Okay, it says to put them all in lecture mode, push star 96.
Hi, Brian.
All guests have been muted. You can unmute your line by pressing star 6.
Okay, now I've got it set up properly, and so we're going to get rolling. You'll notice that on your screen there's a way to raise your hand. So I have a quick little poll here. How many campuses have already paid out full-time student success grant funds? Any schools? Cool. There's several. And you might wonder, well, how did they get money to do that? Well, they must be very resourceful. That's the answer. Okay, in today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the program, sort of its where it came from, the actual budget control language, the intent of the funding, some information and information on communication, definition, eligibility specifics, disbursements to students, surplus grant funding if we have any extra money left over, overpayments and over awards, our funding apportionment system, fiscal reporting, data and IT issues, business office issues at the campus, and then the implementation funding that was supplied along with the funding to get the show on the road. And then we'll talk about the reporting template. So looks like a lot, but a lot of it depends on how many questions you have. And what we've been doing over the last several weeks is collecting questions so that we can work them into the presentation, and also so that we can create a FAQ and then just make sure that we've thought through as many of the things in this program as we can. Since this is a new program, we fully expect that some situations or questions will come up that nobody's yet thought of. So by all means, you can be very helpful to us all by asking those questions. So Senate Bill 93, which was part of the 2015 Budget Act, created this new program. Basically, it just said, hey, there's money available for students who meet these qualifications, and it didn't really give a program name. So we were wondering what the heck to call it. Some of you are aware that we were going to call it the Full-Time Incentive Grant. Apparently we ran that by the legislature and they said, don't call it that. So we changed it to Student Success Grant, and that sounds even better. So it's the FTSSG, Full-Time Student Success Grant. It's payable for this term we're in right now. Very short notice to roll up a financial aid program, but so far things seem to be in place for this to actually happen. So I'm going to say this many times during this presentation. The budget language says that this goes to students who are participating in the Cal Grant B program at community colleges who are attending full-time. But this is not a Cal Grant program. This is the Chancellor's Office program. And so I'll say that 12 more times during this, and please keep a check mark on your desk. So the actual budget control language lays out how much money is going to be available for the program. It says in the language, if you're reading along there, it says receiving the Cal Grant B Access Award and are taking 12 units or more. So that's full time. But then that begs the question, well, wait, what about during the summer? Is that full-time if they're only taking 6 units? We call it full-time. Is it full-time? We'll get to that. But for the time being, for the fall term, this goes to students who you can pay full-time in the Cal Grant B program. It's an augmentation to that funding. Yeah, in the language of the bill, they talk only about Cal Grant B, and they didn't mention Cal Grant C, which is interesting. I mean, those students, they should go full-time and they should move on towards getting their degree, but maybe next time around. But in any case, thank you for the question. We asked the legislature and others what this is for, to support student persistence, retention, and success, to meet the unmet need gap, and despite the fact that the legislature didn't want it, as an incentive to remain at a full-time status and finish your program. The more money we can give students for their living expenses, since their fees are usually waived, the quicker they can get through their program. So as a way to help them get that money early enough, we're hopeful that Tim's pushing the buttons and it's making everything go crazy. This is an incentive grant, and you've heard about national efforts, and MDRC had a test pilot program where they gave more money to students, you know, if they were full-time, to see if it helped in their retention. The results were, yeah, it seems to make a difference. So this is a grand test at the California state level to see whether this small amount of funding can make a difference. If this is a successful program, if we get an indication that this is assisting students, the legislature might be more inclined to provide additional funding. So that's what that's all about. So I don't know what slide I'm on now. Tim's goofed everything out. There we are. Okay. So we're going to be communicating about this program using CFAO All list. Those of you that have staff that are not yet on that list, it'd be a good idea if you got them on. We also set up a mailbox, FTSSG at cco.edu. That's just a mailbox that will accept message into and send a program message out of. One of the good reasons for using something like that is you could send me a message, but if I'm stupid like I always am and I forget to share that around the office, it might not end up on our FAQ document. We want to collect all the questions and then we can quickly cut and paste and get them up to speed. So if you'll use that mailbox, that will be very helpful with any questions that you may have. So at this time for the fall term, full-time is 12 units. Later on we might change that, but we'll cross those bridges when we get there. And this is for full-time Cal Grant B recipients. And we define that as someone who is already paid. You've already certified the student as Cal Grant B eligible. And that means you've done all the stuff to certify that they are eligible. We don't want to see a situation, and it might not be in anyone's best interest, to pay this money before you've paid Cal Grant B, because if something happens and the student's not Cal Grant B eligible, then the student's gotten money for which they're not eligible, and that's what we don't want to have happen. So on the Cal Grant roster, you're reporting the student at a FT status, or in some instances, I believe, an OF status. And once you've done that, that's your certification the person is Cal Grant B eligible. Then you can report to the Chancellor's office the student is going to be paid FTSSG. But we got a lot of questions from people earlier on saying, well, I haven't heard anything from the Student Aid Commission about this program, and how do we report it on the Cal Grant roster? Well, you don't report it on the Cal Grant roster. You report it directly to the Chancellor's office, and we'll be showing you how to do that very, very soon. So these eligibility criteria are the Cal Grant B eligibility criteria, and a few of them have kind of brought up some questions. One was and this was a cut and paste from Cal Grant B. It says be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. Well, what about AB 540? Well, that's covered in the next bullet. Do they really have to have met U.S. selective service requirements? Well, if you're certifying the student is Cal Grant B eligible, you're certifying that they've met selective service requirements. Somebody raised their hand, hey, can you pay them both the Cal Grant and this grant at the same time? Yes, indeed you can. This is meant to be an augmentation to the student's Cal Grant B access payment. So you pay the fall Cal Grant B, and then you pay this. And you can pay it at the same time if you're certifying the Cal Grant B at the same time, or you can do it afterward if that's how you have to do it at your campus. These students, just like all participants in Cal Grant B, don't already have baccalaureate degrees. They're maintaining satisfactory academic progress. It says, have a valid Social Security number. Well, as you're aware, certain undocumented students are not going to have a Social Security number, but those students eligible under AB 540 and AB 131 are eligible for Cal Grant B. So if they're eligible for Cal Grant B, you can pay them for full-time student incentive grant. They go hand in hand. Hopefully as early in the term as possible. Again, the more money you can give to the student early in the term, the less likely they are to say to their employer, boy, I need more hours to pay for my books or whatever. If they get the money as early as possible, then they can stay at half-time or three-quarter time on their job and have more time to study, which is what we want them to do. So at the Chancellor's office, we had all this money, and we tried to determine, well, how much is each student going to get each year? Well, we looked at the statistics from the last data that we had. We observed that the trend was up on the number of Cal Grant Bs that were being paid, and that enrollments were up. mostly at community colleges. So we extrapolated and determined that for this first year, we would set the full-time incentive annual amount at $600. So admittedly, right now, that's a guess. We don't know how many people are actually going to get paid. And so later on in the year, we might make some adjustments to the program to make sure that we utilize all of the funding. But anyway, that means that at a semester school, you're paying the student $300 for fall and $300 for spring. And I should mention at this point that the FTSSG is a full-time grant, and you pay the student, if they're full-time Cal Grant B, you pay them the full grant all at once. It really is intended to get out there in full for the term so the student has access to those funds and can make decisions on their work and school load. Oh. Oh. Okay. Chris, we'll come back and answer your question in a little bit. Thank you. So when you're paying out your Cal Grant B, you're using a freeze date. Just use the same date for FTSSG. If you're using some other date, then use the same date and enrollment level as for the Cal Grant B program. Again, these programs are tied together. One of the reasons why they didn't make this a Cal Grant B program is that the funding source is different. These funds came from Proposition 98 money, and that has to go directly to educational institutions, and it is not supposed to filter its way through other state agencies like the Student Aid Commission. So that's why it's not a Cal Grant, probably. Okay. So just to be painfully clear, you can pay this at the same time as Cal Grant B, after you've paid the Cal Grant B, but not before. We really need to see the certification that the student is paid full-time in the Cal Grant B program. If you're making multiple disbursements, then we would expect or hope that you would just get the money out, FTSSG out as soon as possible. Some students are going to start the term and they're not going to be full-time. But if they pick up units later in the term, it's when they reach that point that you will pay them the full-time student success grant. So long as when all's said and done, they were eligible and paid a full-time Cal Grant B, then that's the eligibility criteria for this program. And it's some. Oh, okay. And there's something you should take a look at here on this screen. Online, this presentation is on the Chancellor's Office website, and on that second line down where it says subsequently to Cal Grant B, it says but prior to Cal Grant B, and there's a missing not. At the very last instance, I caught on that sentence, put in the not in there. So it says don't disperse this prior to Cal Grant B. Wait until you've done all the things that I've been talking at you about. And then a couple of questions came up about a student that had less than full need. We should all be so lucky that if they have received loans and work study and scholarships and Cal Grant and all that, and Cal Grant, and they have less than $600 in need for the year, we would suggest that for the fall, if they're full-time, that you pay them the full $300 because there's no guarantee they'll even be enrolled for spring. So you can pay them the full amount, and then if there's any left over in this example, if they have $500 in unmet need, pay them $300 for fall, and if they enroll full-time for spring, pay them $200 for spring. Unlike some programs, this doesn't have an even term payment policy. So as long as you're not paying more than $300, you can pay the larger amount up front or as soon as they complete or they're in a full-time term. So, if an FTSSG payment was made for the full amount, either $300 or $200 for the term, and the student received a Cal Grant B for full-time status for that same term, then you can disperse the FTSSG. Okay? So changes in enrollment in prior terms or subsequent to payment will not affect the student's eligibility. And if the student's enrollment drops to less than full-time after term payment, they won't be required to repay. So at the time that you're certifying Cal Grant B, you're certifying the full-time student success grant, and they go hand in hand. Sometimes, unfortunately, those two events are spread way out, so it gets a little goofy, but the intent of this is to try to, like I said, this is my fourth time, to get the student to make decisions that to be full-time for the entire school term. And I'm going to be handling the questions as a little bit later. Okay, over-award situations. If you're in a situation where the student has other aid that could be returned, such as loans, or so-called rationed aid like work-study dollars or FSEOG, it would be in everyone's best interest to return those funds, give them the FTSSG, so that other students benefit, and of course the student doesn't end up being over-awarded. So you might have to jockey things around. Again, this may not happen often, but should it happen, do your best to act in the best interest of the student. And then you might want to consider adjusting your standardized cost of attendance budgets to increase the student's eligibility. Sometimes the campus will use a standard budget, but upon investigation they'll find out that the student's budget is actually higher than that, and that allows you to make that adjustment for the student, thus increasing their financial need, thus allowing them to keep all of the financial aid for which they qualified. So this is a portable grant. If they're for fall at one school and get paid, then for spring they're at a different school, they can be paid there. It's just like Cal Grant B. If you're eligible for payment at any school, you're eligible to receive this. Only one payment would be possible per term. So in those situations where there is a consortium in place, then if the terms of that consortium allow you to, then you could make use of cumulative units. And as long as there's 12 units being completed overall, that would be a situation where you could pay the student Cal Grant B per the student aid commission rules, and then therefore you could also make the full-time student success grant payment. Okay, well, I'm going to go back and look at some of these questions, and we'll try to work our way through them. So bear with me while I make it. So Chris said we make 2 payments per semester. Our first reporting file, we report 414 as HT, but they are enrolled full-time. Do we update our file to be 414 full-time?
I'm not sure what your 414 is, but if you're reporting all your students as half-time for the first Cal Grant payment, you probably shouldn't be doing that. You should be reporting what their enrollment status is, and if you're splitting the payment, paying them the first half of a full-time payment if they're full-time, and the first half of a half-time payment if they're half-time. But for the full-time student success grant, we're not going to tell you how to process Cal Grants. You cannot pay them until you're paying them at a full-time status for their Cal B award. So at the beginning, if they're full-time, you should be reporting them as full-time to Cal Grants and paying them the appropriate amount, and then paying them their FTSSG if that's how you're going to do it. If they're only half-time at that first payment, you wouldn't pay them full-time until they've added enough units to get to the full-time mark for the term, or they're not eligible for payment.
This question says, can a student use this grant to pay for past due balance? If the student's eligible for these funds, these are delivered to the student, and they can use this whatever they want to pay it for. As a campus, I don't think you would want to make that decision for the student. In other words, disperse to the student, and then they can pay if there's any past due balances or library fines or whatever it is, that they can make use of it. If the actual disbursement is greater than the initial allocation, is the total disbursement guaranteed to be funded?
I think you better check your allocations, because we sent you enough money to pay both fall and spring for 65% of your Cal Grant awards from the 13-14 year. So I don't think you're going to have a problem in the fall, and you'll need to report fall payments before we'll send you a spring advance. If for some reason you run out of money in the fall because of some type of data anomaly, you'll need to contact us to let us know what's going on, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, the spring reconciliation is where we're going to start trying to figure out whether we set the amount of the grant too low or too high, or who needs extra money, or what campuses have actually been overpaid. So the earlier you can reconcile and get these monies out, the quicker we can make those decisions, and ultimately that's going to benefit all the participating students. This question says, just to be clear, if a student is enrolled full-time and receives their Cal Grant B disbursement and then drops below full-time before we award the FTSSG, do we still pay the FTSSG? You've certified the student is eligible for the full-time Cal Grant B payment. To keep things simple, you should probably put the 2 events as close together as possible, but as long as you're not backing out the Cal Grant B payment or changing that status due to the fact that the student dropped units, the student is eligible for FTSSG. Okay? So just for me to be clear, if the student drops and you have to change that Cal Grant B payment to less than full-time, they lose eligibility for the full-time student success grant.
And when you speak about awarding, I assume you're meaning dispersing the FTSSG. You should have already awarded the student the FTSSG, and it's a matter of making the disbursement on that award. And we'd like them to be as close as possible, as Brian mentioned. You have the authority to make them simultaneously, or to split them up, but to make them as quickly as possible after making the Cal B. You do not have to wait for reconciled payments from Cal Grant B in order to make the FTSSG. And you'll have that money on hand in your office. We've been told disbursements are going September 28th. And we'll show you the reconciliation report and the line item in the report where you can find them in the apportionment report.
How is this grant handled in R2T4? It's a state grant. You would handle it the same way that you would Cal Grant. How do we return funds for stale dated checks? You've received an apportionment, and if a disbursement check is returned, you can make the decision to pay the student the money, or if they're gone, then that just goes back and is unused funds, and when we get to reconciling later on in the year, you need to adjust your roster, our roster here, to reflect that the student was not paid those funds. So if a student has enrollment fees that are due, these funds can't be used to pay those fees. I would expect that, maybe I'm wrong, but all the students that receive Cal Grant B would be eligible for a fee waiver. You know, they're either going to be a resident or eligible under AB 540, and so, okay.
Well, I can't imagine those enrollment fees due, because a student who's qualified for need-based aid should be having their fees waived. If you have other fees that are due, and your policy is to pay the college any outstanding balances, and then pay the student the remaining balances, that would be allowable. But many colleges don't have that policy, and in fact, students have to make payments on accounts. So we're not going to get involved in setting local policy. We expect you to follow your policies with regards to charges on a student's account and whether they can be deducted from payments through financial aid, or whether you would pay a student, expect them to pay any other outstanding balances with the college. But every college may be different in that area. So whatever your policy is, you're expected to follow your local policy.
So we've been saying for the last couple of months that we would expect this.
You probably don't want to stick with question and answer. You guys need to let us finish the presentation. We stopped to talk about disbursements, and now we're getting off into some other areas. So let's concentrate on questions about disbursements, and then we'll move through the presentation to finish the rest. There's people asking about where you can find it in apportionment reports. Later in the presentation, we'll cover that. So on this slide, moving on, this actually answers one of the questions because within a week, these funds should be out, and that was one of the questions. We have held back a little bit of the money, like Tim said. We dispersed 65% of the total funds that we expected would be paid for fall and spring. So you're going to be overpaid for fall. There should be no, unless a tremendous increase has occurred, all campuses should be able to disperse all their fall funds. Remember, to get a spring advance, you're going to need to report a fall reconciliation report. Yep. So sometime in late January, upon looking at the reconciliations and the reported disbursements for fall, that's when we would expect additional funds to go out.
And we'll be establishing a calendar with the monthly reporting deadlines for reconciliation reporting and any subsequent funding adjustments. Depending on what happens. So since we just made a big guesstimate on the annual award amount, an educated guess, probably pretty accurate, but we'll see. What happens if we have money left over, or what if there are certain situations that maybe might not match the letter of the law? I showed you that slide where it says in the budget language that these are for students with 12 units. Well, it's for full-time students. That's the intent. What if at the end of the year, when you count fall, spring, and summer, the students completed 24 units or more? That's full-time. Couldn't they be paid an FTSSG? We haven't made that decision yet, but that would be one possible use of any surplus grant funding. Another one was if the intent of this grant is to have students take more units and complete faster, what if they take 15 units in a semester or 18 units a semester? Would that affect the amount of their award? And again, we haven't made that decision yet, but sometimes when legislation's passed, you want to get to the intent, and the intent of all this is to get the student moving and keep them moving so that they finish faster. The quicker they complete their program, the quicker they can either go to another college, continue to a bachelor's degree, or go out and get employed, or do whatever they were going to do with their education. So we might just make some of these decisions later on.
I want to stress this is a may happen screen, not a will happen screen. So depending on how much cash is available after we've gone through a fall and have an idea of what spring looks like, we may or may not authorize, if we have additional cash available, some of these prospective changes.
So in developing how campuses could report their disbursement to us, we wanted something that was relatively simple and something that we could bring up quickly and could be explained. So we're taking advantage of an existing program, the Osher Scholarship, that's dispersed by the Community College Scholarship Endowment. And they have a spreadsheet or a reporting template in which schools can enter student payments. And if you compare that document with our FTSSG reporting template, you'll notice many similarities. Basically, you're just going to tell us that this student for the fall term was paid this much, and then you'll either supply a Social Security number or a campus ID. And we did that so that the students that don't have a social, usually AB 540 students, you could report them and you could identify who the student is. And here at the Chancellor's office, we could see that that's a unique student and make sure that we correctly accounted for funds that went out. And then later in the year, there might be adjustments up or down depending on how many actual disbursements are made by campuses. So in the Chancellor's Office Management Information System, or COMIS as we call it here at the Chancellor's Office, there's a new reportable value, or GD. That just was one of the unused codes that we had access to. You'll report that under data element SF21. That indicates a full-time student success grant payment was made. Understand that the reporting template that you're going to send to us here in Student Financial Aid, that is what we're going to use to see how many dollars have to, for reconciliation purposes. The reporting that goes on your SARC reports are just going to indicate that a student has been paid so that we can compare that with all the other programs that are dispersed. So there's actually 2 reportings that are going to be made. And I probably should put a slide like that in here so that it's real clear how that's going to work.
Brian, did you say reporting in the SARC?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, Rhonda Moore, Dean of Student Services here at the Chancellor's Office. You're going to be using the SARC gateway or portal. There's probably a name that I haven't learned yet to call it, to actually upload this data. So you'll be using the SARC portal to get us the data.
But it's not the same as the SARC report that they use to make their expenditures, their VSAP expenditures. It's the same portal, but not the same.
We're using the SARC web access portal to be able to upload the reports and for us to be able to review them. But it is not a SARC fillable form. It's something you create locally using Excel or your local software to put it into a comma delimited format and submit that information to us through the SARC website. And that way we have secure file transfer protocols for student social security numbers and other student identifiable information. So you're using SARC to upload the report and to get us the information we need to be able to reconcile your advances.
Thank you.
Is this our manual? Or is it their manual? Okay, so some of the things that you should be doing is updating your policy manual to reflect this program and payment processes and any policies that you want to make sure are clearly laid out. And then, just so I can say it again, CSAC is not involved in this program. It's not a Cal Grant program, so you'll have to do something on your system to have a new award code on your system so that you can keep track of these. Some of the issues that you might have are a program to make awards and payments, and then some type of way to collect the data so you can either use the Excel template, which I'll be showing you here shortly, or creating, like Tim said, the comma delimited file to upload the data to us. Those are adjustments you're going to have to make on your side. In COMAS, you'll have to do your own reconciliations and corrections. Because this is an ongoing program, if you pay somebody and then find out that they weren't eligible, then you report that to us, and that removes that payment. And at the end of the year, then the amount that we paid out to the campuses should equal what you reported in disbursements. In your system, you'll have to map to MIS for the new SF21 GD code that was created. What the heck is syntactical?
Syntactical error messages or syntactical and referential edit messages Syntactical is, have you used an appropriate value for the field? Or in the right context, is that a value that the system can recognize and read? So for example, if you're reporting an FTSSG using some code other than GD, you're going to get a syntactical reference, or it's going to be loaded to some other grant field, which means you'll be over-reporting that grant and under-reporting the new FTSSG grant. Referential edits are things like, in order to get your GD code into the system, you'll need to have a Cal Grant B reported for the same term. Because remember, you've got Cal Grant B awards that are required in order for them to get the FTSSG. So that's a referential edit. Syntactical is being able to understand what you're reporting as a valid value for the field you're reporting it in.
Thanks, Tim. You'll need to create a subsidiary ledger in your system, backed up with detailed payment records to keep track of these funds. You're reporting this information to us, but we're not your record keeper. We're using this for apportionment purposes and to determine whether the full amount of the grant has been dispersed at the end of the year. But I'd also like to say that although we have sent out, or we will be sending out within a week, a lot of money to the campuses, the additional funds that come out, we're not sure when those might be sent. So you're going to get money for fall, and then spring will happen when it happens.
Well, spring will happen in January, but you won't get a spring advance if we don't get a fall reconciliation.
No.
And even if we get a fall reconciliation, if you have enough cash on hand to make your spring payments, we won't send you a spring advance based upon the money we send you. Remember, we sent you a lot of money in this September disbursement, enough to make, hopefully, almost all of your awards for fall and spring. So unless you've witnessed unprecedented growth or significant growth, you may not need additional money in the spring. And in fact, depending on what you report for the fall, we may reduce your allocation in the spring in order to get everybody the right amount of money. So you need to look at the allocations. They're out on the website now. We posted those last week.
Yeah, and we actually had a question that came in about retroactive payments for fall. If you become aware late that a student was eligible for full-time Cal Grant B payment and it's the spring term and they were eligible for fall, just like with Cal Grant, pay them Cal Grant B and then report and pay the full-time student success grant. Of course, in your business office, they'll be very interested as when the funds are likely to be delivered, and that helps them plan cash flow. You'll want to, you'll want to be something about reconciliation, reporting, and liability. What is that?
So as you work with your fiscal office, you need to make sure they know that advances have gone out. They have gone out. They were certified in early September. Payments supposedly were going to be made in late September. We've been told on the 28th. The EFT transactions will be going out. Those that get paper transactions may have a slightly longer delay, but money has gone out to the campuses. To give you an idea, we got $39 million for this program. We've already pushed more than $33 million out to the colleges. So you're going to have a lot of money hitting your fiscal offices. And we'll show you in the Schedule A1 for categorical apportionment where you can find the money. It's listed under a line item towards the bottom of the report called Full-Time Student Success Grant. So that information is going to appear on your apportionment reports as soon as the September advance is completed at the end of this month. You should see them as soon as this Friday on the report, but our understanding again was that those EFT transactions were being pushed on the 28th. So you need to be aware of the fact that, or your fiscal offices need to know that there is cash coming and that there is a requirement that you report payments in order to keep cash flow moving. And again, I mentioned to you earlier, if we sent you $400,000 in the fall for payments for the year, and you only report 100,000 payments or $100,000 worth of fall payments, we're going to assume you only have to make 100,000 with the spring payments, and we're going to take part of that advance back in the spring rather than give you additional money, because we're going to have to manage this program to make sure everybody has enough cash to make the disbursements.
And like the slide says, that any funds in an interest-bearing account, the interest will stay with the college. So a good idea on how to store the funds.
Many of your fiscal offices run sweep accounts, so any balances held in these accounts are often invested in overnight vehicles, yielding small amounts of interest, but on large dollar amounts. And so it makes sense for the district, just from an income standpoint, to have these funds invested in overnight vehicles in order to yield the greatest amount of dollars for your college.
So $3 million was made available to cover implementation costs. When you divide $3 million by 72 districts, you come up with $41,667. It was assumed that colleges would utilize these resources to update their systems to be able to pay these awards. That was their intent. But under all circumstances, the funding is subject to BFAP and SFAA expenditure guidelines and restrictions. So make sure that this money doesn't somehow slither out and go to some other purpose. That would not be a good thing. I think there was one campus who worked with their local foundation to obtain money to start making payments like already, even though the actual funds from the state have not been sent out. That sounded very creative. If you have certified that the students are Cal Grant B eligible and you have funds, by all means you can pay the student. Not all campuses and districts have these types of resources, but one of the benefits of having a foundation set up that assists with campus initiatives. So we worked on a bifold brochure that just points out to students that this is a program that they can take advantage of if they're full-time and receiving Cal Grant B. And I think have those been printed yet? Have we seen those?
I think they were supposed to go out last week or this week.
Okay.
We'll check with ICANN and get information out about when that was sent. I think ICANN usually posts something to the CFAOL list saying that they've been sent to your offices so you know to be looking for them.
It's just a simple piece that you can make available to students and on the benefits of attending at a full-time status. And then ICANN will be featuring messages on this program. We would, in all of your outreach to students, this is a very interesting and different financial aid program because it does encourage or incentivize full-time attendance. Other grants will pay like maybe for half-time status, like Cal Grants, like Pell Grants, but this is a program that is only going to benefit those students who are attending full-time. It's not a huge amount of money, but if it's successful, perhaps the legislature will fund it more fully. So I worked on a template with Tim's help to allow campuses to report these funds to us, and it really has three parts to it: an actual an Excel spreadsheet. You can expel the Excel spreadsheet where you could manually enter payments depending on how many payments you need to make at any particular time. But built into it is also a record layout so that you could create a file and upload that in comma delimited format. So you're not required to use the Excel template, but I suggest that you take a look at it simply because it's got many of the rules that are used when dispersing the funds, and it's a convenient way to get a visual of what's expected. Yeah, I'm going to go to file sharing and share my entire desktop so that you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the Excel spreadsheet. There's three tabs. The first tab is what's called the Rules tab, and then it just talks about who it's for and some of this, most of the stuff that we've been talking now. If you need some text to copy and paste, you can get it here. There'll be other text that's put out on this, but that's the first tab. The second tab is the actual reporting template I was talking about, and this is a good visual because you can see what the data looks like, and like the OSHA template and other templates that have been created, when you take your mouse and run it over the field, for example, the student's last name, it pops up and says maximum number of characters is 19. So it's giving you the valid data that can go into that file, and the student's date of birth, the term indicator field. Notice that it has a place for the student's Social Security number, but if they don't have that, use the school ID, and that way you'll be able to know which student it is and quickly index back to your system if you need to.
Would also provide us with an audit trail.
Yeah. Now, you might say, well, the student's full-time. Do we have to report units? Well, later on in the year, if we get to summer and the student took, maybe 12 units and 9 units, they wouldn't be eligible for payment, but you might find uses. This is only for reporting payments, but we might pay extra funds depending on how many units a student completes. We haven't made that decision yet, but I have experience when I was at CSAC with the middle class scholarship, and there was a lot of unused funds that first year, and they were scrambling to figure out what to do with that money or whether to return it or whatever. So we are going to ask that you confirm the student had enough units to be paid, and then you're provided with a place to put the unmet need so that it's clear that the total payments that are reported don't exceed the $600 annual maximum that's been set. Okay, and then the tab that says Data Dictionary, That's really just the record layout for the comma delimited file. It's the same data that's on the template, and if you use this format and follow the valid values for that particular field, when we get the data, it will jive with everything else, and we'll be able to combine the files and determine how much has actually been totally dispersed by the campuses. Is it on the jump drive? Okay. Well, I'm going to show you something else that's fun. That could be more fun than this. PDF or PDF?
PDF.
Is this it? Yeah. Okay. Uh-oh. It'll rotate that.
So this is Schedule A1 from the apportionment report. This will be out on the web on Friday. For each of your colleges, you'll see a similar report. And down at the bottom in highlighted, it says Full-Time Student Success Grant. The Full-Time Student Success Grant funding, this is a system-wide report. You can see we sent out $33,277,000 to colleges in the September payment or September supplemental advance. So all that money was going out at once in September. That's the money you'll see on the report this Friday that's supposed to transmit on the 28th. And you'll see it as an item on your report under Full-Time Student Success Grant. This is the Full-Time Student Success web page. You'll notice the PowerPoint presentation out there, the fact sheet document, the allocation advance, the full-time transaction reconciliation template, the file transfer protocols to upload to SARC specifically, and then the Full-Time Student Success Grant cumulative Q&A. That's our first posting of that document from all the questions that came in through the mailbox. So if you haven't looked at those, many of your questions may be answered. If you still have questions, remember to send them to the FTSSG mailbox. We pointed that out at the beginning. Let's drop back into the presentation real quick. You got to stop sharing tools.
I'm going to stop sharing.
And click on
This one?
Yeah. So let's look in the question and answer box real quick. I think we answered the retroactive disbursements. Melissa, you asked, are you saying that the funds have already been sent? Yes. I just went over the apportionment reports. Schedule A1 of categorical apportionments should show your Full-Time Student Success Grant campus by campus. So let your fiscal folks know that's where it is so they can get the account set up and the money rolling.
Tom said, and send a revised fall payment spreadsheet. Yeah, if you make a change to a reported payment, you do have to report that change to us. And so perhaps the student wasn't eligible for fall, but then you're reporting that they are eligible. Send that information to us. But if you previously reported the student was eligible, and then you found out that they were not, then you'll need to report that to us so that we can make that adjustment.
We'll need to figure out how we're going to do that. So if you already reported a $300 payment, you may have to report a minus $300 payment to zero them out for the term. We'll get you step-by-steps on how to make those adjustments to the award. Claudia, we showed you where the allocations were on the Full-Time Student Success Grant webpage. You can find them out there now. They've been out there since last week. We posted all that information last week and sent a note to the CFAO listserv. If you're not monitoring CFAO, you're going to be missing information about the grant program. Amber asked, how are we going to take the money back? The money that we would reduce your allocations by will be done through the apportionment process. So if we forwarded you 400 in the fall, 400,000, and you only spent 100,000, we might reduce your allocation to 200,000 through apportionment, thus reducing the amount of money available to you.
So Tom asked the question, what's the last day we can report payments for 15-16? Sometime later.
To be determined. We're going to tell you each month when your reconciliation reports have to be in order to result in your ability to get more money. We'll also communicate deadlines. So monthly deadlines and an annual deadline will be promoted through the CFAO listserv. You'll want to make sure you and others are monitoring that listserv. But that's a good question, Tom. We hadn't considered it. We'll get information out about that soon. Any other questions at this point? Robin from Solano and Deborah from Ohlone, can you clear your hands? You've got your hands up in the hand box.
They went out for a cheeseburger.
Yes, Amber, we'll communicate if we're going to reduce your allocation and any procedures that need to be followed for returning that allocation.
This one. Yeah. I already went over all this.
So we've gone through the reconciliation report.
Did you have anything you wanted to show?
Now, do we have the file transfer stuff on here?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Tim.
Somebody asked if we can get a copy of the PowerPoint. We just showed you where the PowerPoint was available on the Full-Time Student Success Grant webpage. We also sent a link to that when we sent out the information on this call. So you should be able to get the PowerPoint either through the email we sent you with a link to the PowerPoint or the page, or go out to the Full-Time Student Success Grant page. You can find that there, along with all the other resources, including allocations. Any new information we have on the grant program, any updates to the Q&A, they'll all be available on the FTSSG page. So we mentioned that you're going to be uploading through SART. When you go into your SART page, you usually are looking at something like what you see below the SART budget select line. You'll select your district, your college, and that'll pop up automatically if you're under your own login ID. Under Programs, you can do the pull-down menu and select FTSSG. This is just a screen print, so we can't show you exactly right now. And then, again, if you needed to drill down to a specific year, this is the first year. The only thing you'll see out there now is 15-16. But if you needed to select a year, you could select a year for 2 or 3 years down the road. For budget type, you can use the pull-down menu to select out, and all statuses, accepted, submitted, that type of thing. So if you're looking for older reports, either your expenditure reports or your FTSSG, this is where you'll find it. Notice this is a mock-up, but we used Alan Hancock as an example, and the first line item is the FTSSG file. It shows as being in progress. And if you wanted to see the file, you could click on View Detail. But again, this is a screen print, not an actual online demonstration. When you need to upload, you can go in once you've selected it and click on Browse to identify the file you want to send to us. Click on Upload File, and it will load the file for you. Once it's uploaded, look down below, you'll see the upload date. These will all be time-stamped, so we'll know the most recent files that have come in. You may want to set up naming protocols for your own documents so that we know the sequencing that you're sending to us. But for right now, we're going to be relying on the timestamp for the upload when we receive it. It's that simple. You click on Browse, click on Upload. It'll give you a confirmation the file's been uploaded with a date stamp. And you can print that screen to document it. So that's the whole SART process for uploading files. Remember, it's SART for the secure file transfer protocols to protect student identities. Also to upload your final budget details or your SART reporting. Now we're kind of at the end of the presentation. We can take questions if anybody has them. We can allow you to open your line and ask them verbally. If you'd like to have a conversation, just raise your hand and we can take the questions as your hands are raised, or you can type them in the box. If there's any questions we missed in the box, the question from Jennifer is, how often will you need to upload a reconciliation file? You'll need to upload one for the fall so you can get your spring adjustment or advance. After that, if you need additional cash, you'll need to upload files to get cash. And this is a first-time thing for us, so just like, we're bearing with you guys, you're going to have to bear with us as we figure this out, because we want to spend as much of the money as possible without going over. Rhonda told us she doesn't have enough in savings to be able to make any of those extra payments.
No, I don't. Believe it.
So Jennifer, at least one for the fall once you've made your fall disbursements. I don't believe any college will run out of money in the fall, so there won't be any need to do more than the last one when you've made your fall disbursement. Other questions? Anybody want to raise their hand? We can call on you and open the microphones. Just so I know you're still out there, raise your hand if you can hear us.
Yay! Lots of
So the
people.
rest of you already have this all figured out, and all your disbursements are ready to go. You can clear your hands now unless you really have a question. Laura, do you have a question? If you do, you can *6 your phone to unmute it and ask your question. Thank you. Claudia, how about you? A question? Okay. Were we that thorough in the presentation?
Probably. Now everyone's confused. I am.
Okay, well, we're at the end of the presentation. Unless there's questions, we'll stick around. Amber, I don't think there's any drugs for that.
Patty was telling me this morning I had to sit in a little meeting they had.
Y'all are just that good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Appreciate the feedback. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to stick around. If anybody has any last-minute questions, shut down. Have a great day.
job. I want you to cut your transcript of the chat box, drop it into a Word doc, put it on the hard drive, so we'll have any questions we think we need to have.
Very good. Record to do more.
We'll do that next time. Task force to help us put this all together. We need to recognize the work in the rate of 10 of them. Very instrumental.
Okay. 3.5 months, and we got a free program off it.
$33 million out the door.
How much is out the door?
33,277
Plus the 3 million.
plus the 3 million. So 36. We're still holding about 5, 7.